You need to step back from that gate right now." The words sliced through the busy hum of Denver International Airport like a blade through silk, sharp, final, laced with the kind of authority that doesn't ask, it commands. Officer Derek Sullivan, 42, stood at the entrance to the priority boarding lane with his arms crossed, chest puffed, jaw set. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, and his eyes locked onto the man in front of him with the kind of suspicion reserved for people he'd already decided didn't belong. Commander Isaiah Grant didn't flinch. He stood there in full Navy dress blues medals aligned perfectly across his chest, white gloves tucked under his left arm, a small duffel bag slung over his right shoulder. His posture was relaxed but precise, the kind of calm that comes from years of controlling situations far more dangerous than an airport terminal. He was 34, black with close-cropped hair, steady eyes, and a presence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it anyway. Behind Derek stood Officer Trent Baldwin, 38. Hispanic, thinner, quieter, his hand resting near his radio, but his eyes darting between Derek and Isaiah, like he already knew this wasn't going to end well. Trent had seen Derek do this before, seen him stop travelers who looked wrong, seen him ask questions that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with control. But he'd never seen Derek stop someone in military dress blues. That was new. Isaiah took a slow breath and extended his boarding pass toward the scanner. His voice was even calm, professional. "I have priority boarding. My pass was already scanned." Derek didn't move. He didn't reach for the pass. He stared at Isaiah like he was trying to decode a puzzle that offended him just by existing. "I don't care what got scanned. I need to see your ID." Isaiah reached into his jacket pocket with deliberate slowness and pulled out his military identification card. He handed it over without a word. Derek took it with 2 fingers, held it up to the light like it might be counterfeit, then squinted at the photo, then at Isaiah, then back at the photo. "This doesn't look right," Derek muttered. From across the terminal, a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail raised her phone. Amanda Rodriguez, 28. A travel journalist from Austin had been filming airports for a documentary series on TSA procedures. But this was different. She tapped the record button and whispered into the camera. "We're at Denver International Airport, and I'm watching a TSA officer stop a service member in full dress uniform. I don't know what's happening yet, but people are already staring. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been judged by how you look instead of who you are, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to prove that respect isn't given, it's demanded." Now let's rewind to the moment everything started to unravel. Isaiah's flight was supposed to be simple. Fly from Denver to Washington, D.C., attend a briefing at the Pentagon, then catch a red-eye home to San Diego to surprise his daughter Riley at her school assembly the next morning. She was getting an award for a short story she'd written about heroes, and in that story, the hero was him. He'd promised her he'd be there. He always kept his promises. But standing in the terminal now, watching Derek hold his ID like it was evidence in a crime, Isaiah felt that old, familiar weight settle over him. The one that came with being seen as a threat before being seen as a person. He'd felt it at 19 when a cop slammed him against a car for wearing a hoodie in his own neighborhood. He'd felt it during Bud/S training when an instructor told him people like you don't usually make it through. He'd felt it in combat zones where allies looked at him twice before trusting him. And now he felt it here in an airport wearing the uniform he'd bled for. Derek flipped the ID over, inspecting the back like it might have a disclaimer printed in fine text. "Where are you coming from?" "Classified deployment," Isaiah said simply. Derek's eyebrows shot up. "Classified? That's convenient. It's the truth." Derek handed the ID to Trent. "Run this. See if it's real." Trent hesitated. "Derek? He's in uniform. His ID is military issue. The medals." Just run it, Derek snapped. Trent took the ID reluctantly and walked toward the TSA office. Isaiah watched him go, then looked back at Derek. His voice stayed calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. Is there a problem? Officer Sullivan Derek's name tag glinted under the fluorescent lights. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't know yet, but I've seen people buy these uniforms online, seen people fake IDs, seen people walk around pretending to be something they're not. So yeah, maybe there is a problem. From the growing crowd of travelers, a man stepped forward. Frank Mitchell, 52, white, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded Marine's cap and a jacket with a Semper Fi patch on the sleeve. His voice was rough, weathered, angry. Hey, I'm a Marine. Those medals are real. You can tell by the ribbon placement, the wear on the fabric, the way they're aligned. That man served. Show some respect. Derek didn't even look at him. Sir, step back or I'll have you removed. Frank's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Amanda's phone was already up. Behind them, a businessman in a suit did the same. Then a college student. Then a mother holding her toddler's hand. Within 90 seconds, 8 phones were pointed at the scene. Isaiah felt the shift in the room, the way attention bends and magnifies under pressure. He'd been in firefights with less tension than this. Trent returned from the office, handed the ID back to Derek, and whispered something. Derek's expression didn't change. He pocketed the ID instead of returning it. We're going to need you to come with us for secondary screening, Derek said. Isaiah's calm cracked just slightly, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. Secondary screening. For what? Verification purposes. You just verified my ID. We need to verify more than that. Like what? Derek stepped closer, lowered his voice to a tone that was meant to sound reasonable but came out condescending. Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but this isn't going to fly. No pun intended. You're coming with me or you're not flying today. Your choice. Isaiah looked past Derek at the crowd at the phones, at Amanda's wide eyes behind her camera. He thought about Riley, about the promise, about the awards ceremony. Then he thought about every moment like this that had come before, every time he'd stayed quiet to keep the peace, every time compliance had felt like surrender. He met Derek's eyes. Let's go. The secondary screening room was small, windowless, and painted the kind of institutional beige that made everything feel colder than it was. A metal table sat in the center, 2 chairs on either side, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like insects trapped in a jar. Derek gestured toward the far chair. Sit. Isaiah remained standing. I'd like to know what regulation you're following here. I've complied with every request. My ID was verified. What's the legal basis for detaining me? Derek's smile was thin, performative. Detaining. You're not being detained. This is a voluntary screening, then I'm free to leave. Not until we clear this up. Isaiah's voice stayed level, but the edge sharpened. So I am being detained. Before Derek could answer, the door opened. A woman in a dark blue TSA supervisor jacket stepped inside. Janet Holloway, 45, white with silver-streaked hair, pulled back tight wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. She carried a clipboard, a tablet, and an air of absolute certainty. What seems to be the problem here? She asked, her tone already suggesting she knew the answer and had sided with Derek before hearing a word. Derek gestured toward Isaiah like he was evidence. Possible stolen valor situation, uniform inconsistencies, vague answers about deployment, refuses to cooperate. Isaiah's eyebrows lifted. I've answered every question. I've shown my ID. I've been cooperative to the point of absurdity. Janet looked him up and down, her gaze lingering on his medals. Where did you get this uniform? It was issued to me by the United States Navy, when 14 years ago when I enlisted. And these medals, she pointed at the ribbons across his chest, earned in combat. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Purple Heart and others. Janet tapped something on her tablet. Can you prove that Isaiah's calm slipped another fraction? Can I prove I earned medals in combat? Yes. I can show you my service record, my DD-214, my citation letters, but that requires access to classified databases. Convenient, Janet muttered. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed, enjoying this. You know what I think? I think you bought this uniform at a surplus store. I think you printed a fake ID. I think you're counting on people being too polite to question a man in uniform. Well, I'm not polite. Isaiah stared at him. I can see that. Janet set the clipboard down. We're going to need you to remove your jacket. Excuse me. Your jacket. Remove it. We need to inspect the medals. That's not standard protocol. It is now. Isaiah looked at her, then at Derek, then at the door. He could feel the walls closing in, not physically, but psychologically, the suffocating weight of being presumed guilty for existing. Slowly, deliberately, he unbuttoned his jacket and draped it over the back of the chair. The white shirt underneath was crisp, perfectly pressed. The shoulder boards aligned. Derek stepped forward and picked up the jacket. He ran his fingers over the medals, flipping them, inspecting the backs, holding them up to the light. These look mass-produced. They're regulation issue. Anyone can buy these online for $20. Then you should know they're real because the real ones cost more. Derek's jaw tightened. He set the jacket down and pointed at Isaiah's duffel bag. Open it. Why? Because I said so. Isaiah didn't move. That bag contains personal items, unless you have probable cause. We have plenty of cause, Janet interrupted. You're exhibiting suspicious behavior. Standing here answering your questions is suspicious. Refusing to cooperate is... I've cooperated with everything. Then open the bag. Isaiah unzipped the duffel slowly. Inside were a few changes of clothes, a toiletry kit, a book, a small framed photo, and 2 prescription bottles. Derek reached in and pulled out the photo. It showed Isaiah in fatigues kneeling beside a young girl with braids and a gap-toothed smile. Riley. She was holding a sign that read, Welcome home, Daddy. Derek held the photo up. Who's this, my daughter? She doesn't look like you. Isaiah's hands curled into fists at his sides. Excuse me. I said she doesn't look like you. Mixed-race kid, right? Whose is she really? The room went cold. Isaiah's voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. That is my daughter, and you need to put that photo down, now. Derek smiled. Touched a nerve, huh? Outside the room, the crowd in the terminal had grown. Amanda's live stream was up to 3,000 viewers. Frank had called 2 of his Marine buddies who were flying out of Denver that day. They arrived wearing veteran caps, standing shoulder to shoulder at the window that looked into the screening room. Amanda zoomed in on the framed photo in Derek's hand, on Isaiah's expression, on the visible tension radiating off both men. She whispered into her phone. They just questioned whether his daughter is actually his. This has gone from unprofessional to outright cruel. Inside, Derek set the photo down and picked up one of the prescription bottles. He read the label aloud. Sertraline. That's an antidepressant, right? PTSD. Isaiah didn't answer. Janet leaned forward. Are you mentally stable enough to be flying? I'm a decorated combat veteran flying home to see my daughter. My mental health is none of your concern. It is if you're a threat. A threat? Isaiah's voice finally cracked, anger bleeding through. I've spent 14 years defending this country. I've been shot at, blown up, and decorated for valor under fire. And you're calling me a threat because I have a prescription for managing trauma. Derek stepped closer. You're getting awfully defensive. You're being awfully offensive. Janet held up a hand. Gentlemen, let's all calm down. Isaiah turned to her. I've been calm. I've been patient. I've been respectful. And in return, I've been accused of being a fraud, had my daughter questioned and my medical privacy violated. So, no, I'm not going to calm down. I'm going to ask you directly what is the actual reason you're holding me here. Janet's face hardened. We have the authority to screen anyone we deem what a threat based on what criteria. My skin color, my uniform. The fact that I don't fit whatever image you have in your head of what a SEAL looks like, Derek stepped between them. That's enough. You're coming dangerously close to insubordination. Insubordination. Isaiah almost laughed. I'm not in your chain of command. Officer Sullivan, you have no authority over me beyond TSA screening procedures, which you've already violated. Then we'll call someone who does have authority, Derek said. He pulled out his radio. This is Officer Sullivan at Checkpoint 4. I need a supervisor and airport security to secondary screening. Possible impersonation of military personnel. Janet nodded. I'm also calling FBI. Stolen valor is a federal offense. Isaiah reached into his pocket slowly, keeping his hands visible. I need to make a phone call. Derek's hand moved toward his belt. No calls. That's not a request. You're not in a position to make demands. Isaiah pulled out his phone anyway. The screen was black, no case, no identifiable markings. He unlocked it with his thumbprint, scrolled to a contact that had no name, just a number, and pressed dial. It rang twice. A voice answered, clipped and professional. Grant. Isaiah's tone shifted, became formal, controlled. I need immediate verification at Denver International Airport, TSA, Checkpoint 4 secondary screening. Authorization code Trident 7 actual. There was a pause. Confirm location. DIA Terminal West Checkpoint 4. Stand by. The line went silent but didn't disconnect. Isaiah lowered the phone but kept it in his hand. Derek stared at him. Who did you just call? Someone who actually has authority. Janet crossed her arms. That's not going to help you. We've already initiated. Her tablet buzzed. Then Derek's radio crackled. Then the overhead PA system in the terminal beeped 3 times the tone reserved for priority announcements. A voice came through, calm but urgent. All TSA personnel, be advised priority military arrival inbound. Clear gates, 28, 29, and 30 for Department of Defense aircraft. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Derek and Janet exchanged glances. Isaiah said nothing. He just checked his watch. Frank, watching through the window, turned to Amanda. Something's happening. Something big. Amanda's live stream chat exploded. Who did he call? What's happening? Is the military coming inside the room? Derek's confidence wavered for the first time. He looked at Isaiah, then at the phone still in Isaiah's hand, then at Janet. What did you do? Isaiah's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I told you. I called someone with authority. The door to the screening room opened. A man in a suit stepped in, tall, white, early 50s, with the kind of presence that didn't need introduction. Victor Pearson, Chief of Airport Security for Denver International. He looked at Derek, then at Janet, then at Isaiah. What the hell is going on in here? Derek straightened. Sir, we have a possible stolen valor situation. This individual Victor cut him off. This individual, he's standing right here. Address him properly. Derek cleared his throat. This man claims to be a Navy SEAL, but we've found inconsistencies. What inconsistencies? He won't provide details about his deployment. His answers are vague. The uniform could be purchased online. Victor looked at Isaiah. Commander, is it? Isaiah nodded. Commander Isaiah Grant, and your deployment classified. Victor sighed, rubbed his temples. Great. So, we have no way to verify. You have ways? Isaiah interrupted. You just haven't used them. Victor's eyes narrowed. Excuse me, there are verification protocols for active duty personnel. There are databases. There are phone numbers you can call. You've done none of that. Instead, you've detained me, questioned my daughter's parentage, violated my medical privacy, and accused me of a federal crime. So let me ask you. Chief Pearson, is this how Denver treats the people who serve? Victor's face flushed. We treat everyone the same. No, Isaiah said quietly. You don't. Isaiah was 19 the first time he learned that a uniform doesn't make you bulletproof. He was in Detroit 3 weeks before shipping out to Navy boot camp, driving his grandfather's old Buick through a neighborhood he'd lived in his entire life. It was 11 p.m., late summer, windows down, radio playing something low and smooth. Blue lights flashed behind him. He pulled over, hands already on the wheel, engine off, just like his grandfather had taught him. Do everything slow. Keep your hands visible. Don't give them a reason. The officer approached, flashlight in his face. License and registration. Isaiah handed them over, his voice calm. Is there a problem, officer? You were swerving. I wasn't. Don't argue with me, son. Isaiah bit his tongue. The officer walked back to his car, ran the plates, took 15 minutes. When he came back, he leaned into the window. Step out of the vehicle. Why? Because I said so. Isaiah stepped out. Another officer had arrived, parked at an angle, lights swirling. The first officer told Isaiah to put his hands on the hood. Isaiah complied. The officer patted him down roughly, aggressively, hands lingering in places they didn't need to. You carrying anything illegal? No, sir. No drugs. No weapons. No, sir. Where are you coming from? A friend's house. At 11 p.m. Yes, sir. The officer stepped back. What's in the trunk? Nothing, just a spare tire. Open it. Isaiah opened it, empty except for the spare and a jack. The officer shone his light inside, inspected every corner, then closed it. He looked at Isaiah like he was disappointed he hadn't found anything. Get back in your car. Slow down next time. Isaiah got back in, started the engine, and drove away. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. From the humiliation of being treated like a suspect in his own neighborhood in his grandfather's car 3 weeks before leaving to serve the country that just treated him like a criminal. He went home and told his grandfather, a Korean War veteran who'd served in an all-black unit, what had happened. His grandfather listened, nodded slowly, and said something Isaiah never forgot. If you want respect in this country, you have to earn it 100 times over. Then earn it again. You think that uniform you're about to put on will protect you. It won't, but it'll give you a chance to prove them wrong every single day, and maybe, just maybe, one day it'll matter. Isaiah enlisted 2 weeks later. He went through boot camp, then BUDS, the brutal selection process that turned regular sailors into Navy SEALs. Of the 180 candidates who started with him, only 23 finished. Isaiah was one of 3 black men in the class. By the end, he was the only one left. He still remembered the instructor who pulled him aside during Hell Week when candidates were pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits, sleep-deprived, hypothermic, hallucinating from exhaustion. The instructor looked at him and said, "You people don't usually make it through this." Isaiah didn't respond. He just kept going. He finished Hell Week. He finished BUD/S. He became a SEAL. Then he became one of the best. 3 combat deployments, missions in places that didn't officially exist, hostage rescues, direct action raids, counter-terrorism operations that never made the news. He earned the Silver Star for holding a position under fire while his team evacuated wounded civilians. He earned the Bronze Star with valor for a solo rescue mission that saved 6 captured contractors. He earned the Purple Heart when shrapnel tore through his shoulder during an ambush he'd thrown himself into to protect his teammates. And through it all, he carried his grandfather's words, "Earn it 100 times over. Then earn it again." Now he was 34, a father to a 7-year-old girl named Riley, whose mother had died in a car accident when Riley was 2. Isaiah had raised her alone, balancing deployments with custody combat, with bedtime stories, classified briefings, with parent-teacher conferences. She was his world, his reason for coming home, the face he saw when bullets were flying and the mission went sideways. He'd promised her he'd be at her school assembly. She'd written a story about a hero who always kept his promises. The hero's name was Commander Grant. Standing in that screening room, watching Derek and Janet and Victor treat him like a fraud, Isaiah thought about his grandfather, about the instructor, about the cop in Detroit, about every moment he'd been told implicitly or explicitly that he didn't belong. And he decided not this time. Victor Pearson stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, looking at Isaiah like he was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The confidence he'd walked in with had started to erode, but he wasn't ready to admit it yet. He turned to Derek. "You said there were inconsistencies." What exactly? Derek pulled out a small notepad, flipping through pages like he'd been building a case. Vague answers about deployment. Wouldn't specify his unit. Claimed the mission was classified, which is a common excuse for people faking service. The uniform could be purchased online, the medals too. And when we asked for verification, he got defensive. "I wasn't defensive," Isaiah said quietly. "I was clear. There's a difference." Victor turned to him. "Commander Grant, if that's your real name?" "It is." "Then you should understand our position. We can't just take people at their word. You can verify me in 30 seconds. 1 call to Naval Special Warfare Command. 1 database check. But you haven't done that. You've chosen humiliation instead." Victor's jaw tightened. "We're following protocol." "No," Isaiah said, his voice hardening. "You're following bias." Janet stepped forward, tablet in hand. "I've run his ID through our system. It comes back valid, but that doesn't mean it's legitimate. Fake IDs can be sophisticated." "Then call the number on the back of the card," Isaiah said. "It's a direct line to verification services." Janet looked at the ID, hesitated, then set it down. "We'll wait for the FBI. They'll handle it." Isaiah pulled out his phone again. The line was still connected. He raised it to his ear. "Status." The voice on the other end responded immediately. "Aircraft ETA 5 minutes. Ground team already en route to your location." Isaiah lowered the phone. Victor, Derek, and Janet stared at him. "What aircraft?" Derek asked. Isaiah didn't answer. He just checked his watch again. Outside the screening room, the terminal was shifting. Amanda's live stream had hit 10,000 viewers. Frank and his Marine buddies had been joined by 2 Army veterans, an Air Force pilot, and a Navy corpsman who happened to be catching a flight. They stood in a loose formation outside the window, arms crossed, watching. Amanda narrated for her audience. "The energy out here is incredible. Veterans are gathering. People are whispering. Someone just told me 3 military aircraft are inbound to Denver. I don't know what's happening, but this feels bigger than a random screening." Inside, Derek's radio crackled. "All units be advised, multiple federal vehicles approaching Terminal West. DOD plates, requesting clearance to restricted zones." Victor grabbed his own radio. "Who authorized that?" The voice came back uncertain. "Sir, they're not asking. They're informing." Victor's face went pale. He looked at Isaiah. "What did you do?" "I made a phone call." "To who?" "People who outrank you." Before Victor could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, saw the caller ID, and his face drained of color. He answered, stepping toward the corner. "This is Pearson." The voice on the other end was sharp, female, furious. "Victor, this is the Denver Chief of Police. What the hell is happening at your airport, ma'am? We have a situation with a potential stolen valor case." What, do you have any idea who you're holding?" "We're verifying." "You're not verifying anything. You're creating a national incident. Stand down. Now." "Chief, I don't understand." You will. The line went dead. Victor lowered his phone slowly. His hands were shaking. Janet's tablet buzzed. She looked at the screen and her confidence crumbled. Her face went from certain to terrified in the span of 3 seconds. She looked at Derek, then at Victor, then at Isaiah. "We need to let him go," she whispered. Derek's head snapped toward her. "What?" "No, we've got him." "We just need." Janet held up the tablet. "I just got an email from the TSA regional director. It says, and I quote, 'Release Commander Isaiah Grant immediately and detain everyone involved in his screening pending investigation.'" Derek grabbed the tablet, read it himself, then looked at Isaiah. "This is a trick. You set this up." "I didn't set anything up," Isaiah said calmly. "I just made a phone call to people who actually know who I am." Victor's phone rang again. He answered without checking the ID Pearson. This time the voice was male, deep, unmistakable authority. "Chief Pearson, this is General Raymond Clark, United States Special Operations Command. You are currently detaining one of my operators. You have 3 minutes to release him before I personally fly to Denver and dismantle your career brick by brick." Victor stammered. "General, we were just following protocol. You were following stupidity." 3 minutes. The line went dead. Victor stood there, phone in hand, looking like a man watching his life collapse in real time. Derek was reading the email again, over and over, like the words might change if he stared long enough. Janet had backed into the corner, arms wrapped around herself. Isaiah stood in the center of the room, perfectly calm, perfectly still. "You have 2 minutes now." Derek's face twisted. "This is insane. We did everything right." "No," Isaiah said quietly. "You did everything wrong, and now you're going to pay for it." The PA system crackled again. "All personnel priority military movement in progress. Secure all checkpoints. Federal agents entering the building." Outside, Amanda's camera caught it first. The terminal doors opened, and 6 military police officers in full dress uniforms marched through. Leading them was a woman in Navy Officer Blues Hispanic early 30s, with captain's bars on her shoulders and a look of absolute focus. Captain Melissa Torres, Naval Intelligence. Behind her, a man in Navy JAG uniform, Asian American 40s, Commander James Wu. Behind them, 2 FBI agents in suits. The crowd parted like water. Frank snapped to attention and saluted. The other veterans followed. Amanda's live stream exploded. "Oh my God, the military is here. This is real. This is happening." Captain Torres walked straight to the screening room door and opened it without knocking. She stepped inside, followed by Commander Wu and the FBI agents. She looked at Isaiah first. "Commander Grant, are you injured?" "Negative, Captain. Just delayed." She turned to Victor, Derek, and Janet. Her voice was ice. "I'm Captain Melissa Torres, Naval Intelligence. Which one of you is in charge?" Victor raised his hand weakly. "I'm the airport security chief." "Not anymore," Torres said. She pulled out a folder and handed it to him. "You're relieved pending federal investigation. Same goes for the 2 of you." She pointed at Derek and Janet. Derek stepped forward, desperate. "We were just doing our jobs." Commander Wu stepped forward, pulled out a badge. "I'm JAG. Before any of you say another word, I'm advising you that everything from this point forward is part of an official investigation. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." The door opened again. More people entered. A 2-star admiral in Navy dress uniform, an assistant to the Secretary of Defense, a congressman from Colorado, and finally striding through the crowd with the kind of presence that stops conversations mid-sentence, Rear Admiral David Cross, 56, white head of Naval Special Warfare Command. He looked at Isaiah and nodded once. "Commander." Isaiah came to attention. "Admiral." Admiral Cross turned to Victor, Derek, and Janet. His voice was calm, conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Do you understand who you've detained?" Victor stammered. We were told he might be impersonating. He's not impersonating anyone. He is Commander Isaiah Grant, United States Navy SEAL Team 6 recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star, with Valor Purple Heart, and currently under consideration for the Navy Cross, for a classified operation completed 6 days ago. He was flying to Washington, D.C. to brief the Secretary of Defense on that operation. An operation so sensitive that his movements are classified at the highest levels. You just delayed critical national security intelligence and exposed a Tier 1 operator in a public terminal. Janet's knees buckled. She grabbed the table for support. Derek's face went from red to gray. Victor looked like he might vomit. Admiral Cross continued. Commander Grant was traveling commercially to maintain operational security. He was supposed to be invisible. You made him visible. You made him a spectacle. And in doing so, you've compromised protocols that exist for a reason. Isaiah spoke quietly. Admiral, permission to explain my situation to these officers. Admiral Cross nodded. Granted. Isaiah turned to Derek, Janet, and Victor. His voice was calm, measured, but every word landed like a hammer. I wasn't being vague about my deployment. I was being classified. I wasn't refusing to cooperate. I was following OPSEC. And I wasn't being defensive. I was being patient while you violated my rights, questioned my daughter, and treated me like a criminal. You had every tool available to verify who I am. You chose not to use them. And now you're going to learn what happens when bias overrides reason. Derek's voice cracked. We didn't know. You didn't ask, Isaiah said. There's a difference. The silence in the screening room was suffocating. Derek stood frozen, his earlier confidence shattered into fragments that cut deeper the longer he tried to hold on to them. Janet had sunk into a chair, staring at the floor, her hands trembling. Victor leaned against the wall, face ashen, phone buzzing in his pocket with calls he couldn't bring himself to answer. Captain Torres stepped forward, her voice crisp and official. Commander Grant, we have transportation standing by. Admiral Cross gestured toward the door. Isaiah picked up his jacket, slipped it back on with the same precision he'd removed it, buttoned it slowly, and adjusted his medals. He looked at Derek one last time. You still have my military ID. Derek fumbled in his pocket, pulled it out, and handed it over like it was burning his fingers. Isaiah took it, inspected it for damage, then slid it into his wallet. He picked up his duffel, slung it over his shoulder, and walked toward the door. As he passed Victor, he paused. You asked me if this is how Denver treats people who serve. Now you know the answer. Outside the screening room, the terminal had transformed. What had been a handful of onlookers was now a crowd of over 100 people. Phones raised some filming, some watching in stunned silence. Veterans lined the pathway from the screening room to the main corridor, standing at attention. Amanda's live stream had hit 89,000 viewers, the chat scrolling faster than anyone could read. Isaiah stepped into the terminal, and the first person he saw was Frank. The retired Marine saluted, tears streaming down his weathered face. Isaiah returned the salute sharp and clean. Frank lowered his hand and whispered, Brother, I should have done more. I should have stopped them. Isaiah shook his head. You stood up. That's what mattered. They embraced briefly, a moment of shared understanding that didn't need words. Then Isaiah moved through the line of veterans, each one saluting each one, holding the position until he passed. Amanda captured every second, her hands shaking as she tried to keep the camera steady. But the story wasn't over, not even close. As Isaiah walked toward the main terminal, Captain Torres fell into step beside him. Sir, there's something you should know. This situation has escalated beyond the airport. Isaiah glanced at her. How so? Your detention was flagged in real-time monitoring. When you made that call, it triggered protocols we have for Tier 1 operators in potential hostile situations. Within 90 seconds, Naval Special Warfare Command was notified. Within 3 minutes, the Pentagon was briefed. Within 5, the Secretary of Defense was informed. Isaiah stopped walking. The Secretary knows, yes, sir, and she's not happy. Behind them, through the screening room window, Derek was being escorted out by 2 FBI agents. His badge was gone. His radio confiscated his face, a mask of shock and disbelief. Janet followed, flanked by TSA Internal Affairs investigators, who'd arrived within minutes of the first call. Victor was speaking to the Denver Airport Authority director, a conversation that involved a lot of hand gestures from the director and a lot of head hanging from Victor. Amanda zoomed in on Derek as he was walked through the terminal. Her live stream chat erupted. Is he being arrested? What's happening? Someone said this is going federal, she narrated quietly. Derek Sullivan, the TSA officer who detained Commander Grant, is being escorted by FBI. I don't know if he's under arrest, but this is unprecedented. I've covered airport incidents for 3 years. I've never seen anything like this. Back in the main terminal, Isaiah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw a FaceTime call from a number saved as Riley. He answered immediately, turning slightly away from the crowd. Riley's face filled the screen, her braids tied with blue ribbons, her eyes wide. Daddy, are you okay? It's on the news. Isaiah's expression softened instantly, all the tension draining from his face. I'm fine, baby girl. Everything's okay. They said you were in trouble. They said people were mean to you. Some people made a mistake. But it's being fixed. Are you still coming to my assembly I promised? Didn't I? Riley smiled, the gap in her front teeth visible. You always keep your promises. Always. I'll see you tomorrow morning. I love you. I love you too, Daddy. The call ended. Isaiah slipped the phone back into his pocket, and when he turned around, Admiral Cross was standing there. The Admiral's expression was unreadable. Commander, that was your daughter. Yes, sir. She knows what happened. She saw it on the news. The Admiral's jaw tightened. Then this just became personal for me, too. He pulled out his own phone and made a call. Someone answered immediately. This is Admiral Cross. I want a full media briefing prepared within the hour. I want statements from the Secretary, from SOCOM, from the Joint Chiefs, if necessary. And I want it made crystal clear what happened here today and why it will never happen again. He hung up and looked at Isaiah. You're not just a data point in a report, Commander. You're a father, a operator, a patriot. And what happened to you today is a stain on every value this country claims to defend. We're going to make sure everyone knows it. Isaiah nodded once. Thank you, sir. But there was more happening behind the scenes, currents of consequence flowing faster than anyone in the terminal could see. In Washington, D.C., the TSA administrator received a call from the Secretary of Homeland Security. The conversation was brief and brutal. You have a disaster in Denver. Fix it. Now. In a Denver law office, Derek Sullivan's wife received a call from a reporter asking for comment. She hung up, Googled her husband's name, and saw the headlines already forming. TSA officer detains decorated Navy SEAL. Video goes viral. Career in jeopardy. She called Derek's cell. It went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She sat down at the kitchen table and started crying. In the TSA regional office, Janet Holloway's personnel file was pulled. Investigators found 14 complaints over 6 years. 12 involved travelers of color. None had resulted in discipline. That was about to change. In Victor Pearson's office, the airport authority director was cleaning out Victor's desk while Victor watched. You're done here, the director said. Effective immediately. Security credentials revoked. Access terminated. You'll receive termination paperwork by end of business today. But in the terminal, none of that was visible yet. What was visible was the arrival of more officials, more press, more attention. News vans were pulling up outside. Reporters were setting up cameras. The Denver police chief arrived flanked by public affairs officers. The mayor's office released a statement within 20 minutes. Hashtag started trending. Hashtag Denver Seal. Hashtag Isaiah Grant. Hashtag Justice for Grant. And through it all, Isaiah stood calm, centered, waiting. Amanda approached him carefully, phone still recording. "Commander Grant, can I ask you a question?" Isaiah looked at her, then at the camera. "Go ahead. How do you feel right now?" He thought for a moment. Tired, angry, relieved, and determined. Determined to do what? To make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. Do you think it will change anything? It has to. Because if it doesn't, then what was all of this for? The camera caught his expression, the weight of years behind his eyes, the quiet resolve that had carried him through wars and now through this. Amanda thanked him and stepped back, but she kept recording. She knew this was history. Trent Baldwin Derrick's former partner approached hesitantly. He'd been separated from Derrick, interviewed by FBI, and told to remain available. He walked up to Isaiah, stopped a few feet away, and spoke quietly. "Sir, I owe you an apology. I knew what Derrick was doing was wrong. I should have stopped him. I didn't. That's on me." Isaiah looked at him. "You're right. You should have." Trent nodded, swallowed hard. "I'm going to make it right. I'm going to testify to everything I saw, everything he's done before this." Isaiah's expression didn't soften, but he nodded once. "That's a start." As Trent walked away, Commander Wu approached with a tablet. "Sir, we're documenting everything. Witness statements, video evidence, internal communications. This is going to be a comprehensive investigation." "Good," Isaiah said. "Make sure it's thorough, because I don't want apologies. I want accountability." "You'll have both, sir." The PA system crackled one more time. "All passengers, please be advised that Terminal West security checkpoint is temporarily closed for official investigation. Alternative checkpoints are available. We apologize for the inconvenience." Isaiah looked at Captain Torres. "Am I clear to fly?" She smiled slightly. "Sir, we have a military aircraft waiting for you. Direct flight to D.C. You'll brief the secretary on schedule. What about my commercial ticket?" "Consider it upgraded." The walk from the screening area to the military transport gate felt like moving through a dream or maybe a reckoning. Isaiah moved through the terminal, flanked by Captain Torres and Commander Wu with Admiral Cross a step behind, and everywhere he passed, people stopped. Some applauded, some saluted, some just stared, trying to process what they were witnessing. Amanda's live stream was now over 150,000 viewers. She followed at a respectful distance, narrating quietly. "We're watching Commander Isaiah Grant being escorted to a military aircraft. This man was detained, humiliated, and accused of stolen valor less than an hour ago. Now he's surrounded by high-ranking officers, and the people responsible for detaining him are facing federal investigation. This is the most incredible story I've ever covered." They reached Gate 30, which had been cleared entirely. 2 Marines in dress blues stood guard at the entrance. They saluted as Isaiah approached. He returned it and stepped through. But before he could board, Admiral Cross put a hand on his shoulder. "Commander, there's something you need to see." He handed Isaiah a tablet. On the screen was a press release time-stamped 11 minutes ago from the Department of Defense. Immediate release. The Department of Defense confirms that Commander Isaiah Grant, United States Navy SEAL, was unlawfully detained at Denver International Airport today while traveling on official orders. Commander Grant is a highly decorated Tier 1 operator returning from a classified mission. The individuals responsible for his detention are under investigation for civil rights violations and obstruction of military operations. The DoD takes this matter with the utmost seriousness and will pursue all available legal remedies. Secretary of Defense Taylor Morrison will address this incident at a press conference scheduled for 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Isaiah read it twice. He looked up at Admiral Cross. The Secretary is holding a press conference. Yes, and she wants you to attend via video link. Isaiah hesitated. Sir, I'm not trying to be a symbol. I just want to get to D.C. and do my job. Admiral Cross's expression was firm but understanding. Commander, you already are a symbol. The question is whether you use that to make things better or let it fade into noise. Your choice. Isaiah thought about Riley, about the story she'd written, about the award ceremony tomorrow, about every service member who'd been stopped, questioned, doubted. He nodded. I'll do the video link. Good. We'll set it up on the flight. As Isaiah moved toward the aircraft stairs, a voice called out behind him. Commander Grant. He turned. Running toward the gate was a young woman in a TSA uniform, Hispanic, mid-20s, slightly out of breath. She stopped at the security line where the Marines blocked her path. She held up her badge. I'm Rosa Delgado. I was just hired last month. I need to say something to him. Please. The Marines looked at Admiral Cross. He nodded. They let her through. Rosa approached Isaiah nervous but determined. Sir, I just want you to know that the training I received never prepared me to see someone like you and treat you with dignity. The whole system is broken. But because of what happened today, they're already changing protocols. They're rewriting the training. And I promise you I'm going to make sure I'm part of the solution, not the problem. Isaiah studied her for a moment. How long have you been with TSA? 3 weeks. And you already see what's wrong with it. I saw what happened to you. That was enough. Isaiah extended his hand. Then I'm counting on you, Rosa. She shook it, tears in her eyes. You have my word, sir. She stepped back, saluted awkwardly, then hurried away. Isaiah watched her go, then turned to Admiral Cross. People like her are why this matters. Agreed. They boarded the aircraft a C-37, the military version of a Gulfstream. Inside the cabin was configured for senior officials, leather seats, secure communications workspace. Captain Torres set up a laptop at one of the stations for the video link. Commander Wu pulled out files and began organizing evidence for the investigation. Isaiah sat near a window and looked out at the terminal. From this angle, he could see the news vans, the reporters, the crowd still gathered. He could see Derek being led toward a police vehicle. He could see Janet sitting on a bench, head in her hands. He could see Victor standing alone, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling a lawyer. The engine started. The aircraft began to taxi. And somewhere over Colorado, as Denver fell away beneath him, Isaiah's phone rang. It was a restricted number. He answered. Commander Grant. Commander, this is Secretary Morrison. Isaiah sat up straighter. Madam Secretary, I've been briefed on what happened. I want you to know that I'm personally overseeing the response. What happened to you today is unacceptable, and it reflects failures at multiple levels. We're going to fix them. Thank you, ma'am. I also want you to know that your mission brief has been moved to tomorrow morning. You're going to brief me and the Joint Chiefs directly. Your work saved lives, Commander. What happened in Denver doesn't change that. Understood, ma'am. One more thing. The press conference tonight is going to address this incident publicly. I'm going to make it clear that this was not an isolated failure. This was part of a larger pattern that we're going to dismantle. Are you willing to participate? Isaiah thought about Riley again, about the promises he'd made, about the promises his country was supposed to keep. Yes, ma'am, I am. Good. Captain Torres will coordinate logistics. Commander, you've served with honor for 14 years. You shouldn't have to fight for respect in your own country. But since you did, we're going to make sure it counts. The call ended. Isaiah leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, and let the exhaustion finally settle over him. Not the exhaustion of the mission he'd just completed. The exhaustion of fighting battles he shouldn't have to fight. Captain Torres sat across from him. "Sir, video link is ready whenever you are. Give me 10 minutes. Take your time." He pulled out his phone and opened the photo Derek had questioned. Riley's face bright and trusting, holding that "Welcome Home, Daddy" sign. He stared at it for a long moment, then typed a text. "Got delayed, but I'm on my way. See you tomorrow. I love you, baby girl." Riley's response came back immediately. "I love you too, Daddy. You're my hero." Isaiah smiled, the first genuine smile since walking into that terminal. Then he straightened his uniform and walked to the laptop. He was ready. By the time Isaiah's flight touched down at Joint Base Andrews outside Washington, D.C., the world had already shifted beneath the feet of Derek Sullivan, Janet Holloway, and Victor Pearson. Derek sat in a small interrogation room at the Denver FBI field office across from 2 agents and a civil rights attorney from the Department of Justice. His badge sat on the table between them, already deactivated. His weapon had been confiscated at the airport. His phone had been seized for evidence. He looked smaller now, diminished, like a man who'd just realized the ground he'd been standing on was never solid. Agent Morrison, a black woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, slid a folder across the table. "Mr. Sullivan, we've been reviewing your record. In the past 6 years, you've initiated secondary screenings on 127 travelers. Of those, 89 were people of color. 62 of those screenings resulted in no violations, no contraband, no issues. Want to explain that pattern?" Derek's lawyer, a public defender assigned that afternoon, put a hand on his arm. "Don't answer that." Agent Morrison leaned back. "That's fine. We have enough to proceed without his cooperation. Derek Sullivan, you're being charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal civil rights violation. You're also facing potential charges for obstruction of military operations and unlawful detention. If convicted, you're looking at up to 10 years in federal prison." Derek's face went white. 10 years I was doing my job. "No," Agent Morrison said coldly. "You were doing your bias. There's a difference." Outside that room, reporters were already digging into Derek's history. By 8 p.m. that night, a local news station aired an interview with Jamal Turner, a black college student who'd been detained by Derek 2 years earlier. Jamal had been traveling home for Thanksgiving, was pulled into secondary screening, missed his flight, and filed a complaint that went nowhere. "He did the same thing to me," Jamal said on camera. "Asked where I got my ticket, if someone bought it for me, treated me like I didn't belong in an airport. I was 19 years old, flying home to see my mom, and he made me feel like a criminal. I'm glad this is finally catching up to him." The story went viral within an hour. At TSA headquarters in Washington, the administrator convened an emergency meeting with regional directors. The message was blunt. "We have a national credibility crisis. Denver is the spark, but the fuel has been building for years. We are implementing immediate reforms, and anyone who resists will be removed." Janet Holloway sat in her living room watching the news coverage with growing horror. Her name was being mentioned. Her photo was on the screen. A reporter was standing outside the Denver airport explaining that Janet had supervised the detention and had a history of complaints. Janet's phone buzzed with calls from friends, former colleagues, reporters. She ignored them all. Her husband, sitting beside her, asked quietly, "Did you know who he was?" "No," she whispered. "Would it have mattered?" She didn't answer. The TSA regional director called her at 9 p.m. "Ms. Holloway, effective immediately, your employment with the Transportation Security Administration is terminated. You'll receive formal paperwork within 24 hours. Your pension has been adjusted due to termination for cause. Do not attempt to enter any federal facility. Your security clearances are revoked." Janet tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The line went dead. She sat there in the silence, 20 years of service evaporating like smoke. Victor Pearson's fall was even faster. By the time he arrived home that evening, his termination paperwork was already in his email. The Denver Airport Authority had moved with ruthless efficiency. His access badges were disabled. His name was removed from the website. His office was being cleared by security personnel who packed his personal items into boxes and shipped them to his home address. His daughter, an Air Force captain stationed in Germany, called him at midnight her time. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Victor tried to explain. "We were following protocol. We didn't know." "You didn't ask," she shouted. "You had a Navy SEAL in dress blues with medals and a military ID, and you treated him like a criminal. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? I serve in the same military you just disrespected. I can't defend this. I can't defend you." "Sweetheart, please don't call me. Don't email me. I need time to process that my father is the person in those videos." She hung up. Victor sat in his darkened living room, staring at his phone, watching his career, his reputation, and his relationship with his daughter collapse in real time. But there was one person in that screening room whose trajectory went a different direction. Trent Baldwin sat across from FBI investigators and told them everything. He described Derek's pattern of targeting travelers based on appearance. He detailed conversations where Derek joked about "those people" and looking for the right kind of trouble. He admitted his own complicity, his silence, his failure to intervene. "Why didn't you stop him?" Agent Morrison asked. "Because I was afraid," Trent said, quietly. "Afraid of rocking the boat. Afraid of being labeled a troublemaker. Afraid of losing my job. So I stayed quiet and I let him do it over and over. That ends today." Agent Morrison made notes. "Mr. Baldwin, your cooperation is noted. You're being suspended without pay for 6 months pending investigation. But if you're serious about being part of the solution, we're going to need more than words. We're going to need testimony. You'll have it." Back at Denver International Airport, Rosa Delgado stood in a conference room with 30 other TSA officers watching a hastily assembled training video. It featured clips from Amanda's live-stream statements from Admiral Cross and a new policy outline titled "Dignity in Service Reformed Protocols for Screening." The trainer, a veteran TSA supervisor brought in from D.C., paused the video. "What happened today should never happen again. We're implementing biometric verification for all military personnel. We're requiring supervisors to approve any secondary screening that isn't based on specific articulable security concerns. And we're installing body cameras at every checkpoint. This is not optional. This is mandatory." Rosa raised her hand. "What happens if an officer refuses to follow the new protocols?" "They're terminated," the trainer said simply. "No warnings. No second chances. We've lost the public's trust. We earn it back by doing better, or we don't earn it back at all." At 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Secretary of Defense Taylor Morrison stepped to a podium in the Pentagon briefing room. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, military officials. She wore a dark suit, an American flag pin on her lapel, and an expression that could cut steel. "Good evening. Today, a decorated Navy SEAL returning from a classified mission was unlawfully detained at a civilian airport. Commander Isaiah Grant, a Tier 1 operator with 14 years of exemplary service, was subjected to humiliation, illegal detention, and civil rights violations. This is unacceptable. It is a stain on our nation's values and a betrayal of the trust we place in those who serve." She paused, letting the words settle. "The individuals responsible are facing federal investigation and prosecution. The Transportation Security Administration is implementing immediate reforms, and the Department of Defense is launching a comprehensive review of how service members are treated in civilian spaces. But let me be clear, this is not just about one incident. This is about a pattern of bias that has been allowed to persist for too long." On the screen behind her, Isaiah's face appeared via video link from Joint Base Andrews. He was still in dress blues medals, visible expression calm but resolute. Secretary Morrison continued, "Commander Grant has agreed to speak briefly." Commander Isaiah looked directly into the camera. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was emotion underneath. "What happened to me today was not unique. It was just visible. Service members, veterans, and civilians are profiled, questioned, and mistreated every day. The difference is most of those moments aren't filmed. Most of those voices aren't heard. I'm standing here not because I want attention, but because I refuse to let this moment be wasted. If my experience leads to real change, then it was worth it. If it doesn't, then we've failed again." The room was silent. Secretary Morrison stepped back to the podium. "Change begins now. Within 90 days, every airport in this country will have protocols to verify military personnel instantly. Within 6 months, we'll have mandatory bias training for all TSA personnel, and anyone who violates these standards will face consequences. Not reviews, not warnings, consequences." She took no questions. The briefing ended. But the message was delivered loud and clear. In Denver, Derek watched the briefing from the FBI field office. He saw Isaiah's face on the screen and felt something crack inside him. Not remorse, not yet, but the beginning of understanding that he'd destroyed his own life. Janet watched from her couch and turned off the TV. She couldn't bear to see any more. Victor watched from his home office and realized for the first time that he'd been wrong. Not procedurally wrong, morally wrong. And across the country, in living rooms and barracks and coffee shops, people watched and shared and posted and talked. The hashtags trended for days. The videos were watched millions of times. And slowly, painfully, the machinery of change began to turn. 90 days after Denver, the change wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real, implemented, measurable. Every major airport in the United States had installed biometric verification terminals at TSA checkpoints. Service members in uniform could scan their military ID, and within seconds the system confirmed their status, rank clearance level, and current orders. No questions, no delays, no humiliation. Isaiah stood in the San Diego airport watching a young Marine corporal use the system for the first time. The Marine scanned his ID. The screen turned green, and the TSA officer waved him through with a respectful nod. The whole process took 8 seconds. Rosa Delgado, who'd transferred to San Diego at Isaiah's recommendation, stood beside him. "It works. It actually works." Isaiah nodded. "This is what it should have been from the beginning." But the verification system was just one piece. The real change went deeper. TSA had implemented mandatory body cameras at all checkpoints, footage reviewed randomly and flagged by AI for potential bias patterns. Officers who showed repeated patterns of profiling were placed under review immediately. 3 had already been terminated in the first 60 days. Bias training had been redesigned from the ground up. Gone were the generic PowerPoint presentations. Now, officers sat through 8-hour sessions led by veteran civil rights attorneys and travelers who'd experienced profiling firsthand. They watched videos. They heard stories. They were confronted with the impact of their assumptions. Trent Baldwin had become part of that training. He stood in front of a room of 40 TSA officers in Chicago and told them about Derek, about his own silence, about the cost of looking away. "I watched my partner target people based on skin color for 6 years," Trent said. "I knew it was wrong. I said nothing. And when he detained Commander Grant, I stood there like a statue. That's complicity. That's how injustice happens, not just because bad people do bad things, but because good people do nothing." An officer in the front row raised her hand. "What changed for you?" I saw the look on Commander Grant's face when my partner questioned whether his daughter was really his. I saw a decorated war hero being treated like a criminal, and I realized that my silence made me just as guilty. So I made a choice. I testified. I became a whistleblower, and I accepted the consequences. What were the consequences? I was suspended for 6 months without pay. I lost my seniority. My wife almost left me. My friends in TSA stopped talking to me. But I can look at myself in the mirror now. That's worth more than a paycheck. The room was quiet. But the reform didn't stop at airports. Isaiah had been appointed to a DoD oversight committee focused on military-civilian interactions. He worked with representatives from TSA, Homeland Security, the ACLU, and veteran advocacy groups to create Project Valor Shield, a comprehensive database and protocol system. The database allowed any law enforcement or security personnel to verify active duty or veteran status in real time with built-in privacy protections and audit trails. If an officer queried someone's status, that query was logged. If patterns of unnecessary queries emerged, the officer was flagged for review. At a congressional hearing 6 months after Denver, Isaiah testified before the House Committee on Homeland Security. Chairman Williams, a white congressman from Texas, asked the first question. "Commander Grant, do you believe the reforms implemented since your detention are sufficient?" Isaiah leaned into the microphone. "No, sir, I don't." The room stirred. "I believe they're a strong start," Isaiah continued. "But real change requires more than new technology and revised training. It requires accountability. It requires consequences. And it requires a cultural shift that acknowledges the problem isn't just a few bad officers. The problem is a system that allowed those officers to operate unchecked for years. What specific changes would you recommend? Mandatory reporting of complaints with public databases tracking patterns across agencies, independent review boards for bias allegations, not internal investigations that protect their own, and criminal prosecution for civil rights violations, not just terminations and transfers. Congresswoman Davis, a black representative from California, nodded approvingly. "Commander, you've become an advocate for reform while still serving on active duty. Has that created challenges for you?" Isaiah paused. "Ma'am, I didn't want to be an advocate. I wanted to be invisible, but invisibility is a privilege I don't have. So if my visibility can protect the next service member, the next traveler, the next person who doesn't fit someone's narrow idea of who belongs, then I'll accept that role." The hearing room erupted in applause. Chairman Williams banged his gavel, but he was smiling. Later that day, Isaiah met with Amanda Rodriguez, who'd turned her viral live stream into a documentary series called Flying While Black. The series had been picked up by a major streaming platform and was already generating awards buzz. They sat in a coffee shop near the Capitol, and Amanda showed him rough cuts of the final episode. "I want to end with your daughter," Amanda said, "with Riley's award ceremony. Is that okay?" Isaiah watched the footage, Riley on stage reading her story about heroes who keep promises. Isaiah in the audience in dress blues, tears in his eyes. "Yeah. That works?" Amanda closed her laptop. "You know you changed my life, right? I was a struggling freelancer before this. Now I have a career, a platform, opportunities I never imagined. You earned those. I just gave you the story. You gave me more than that. You showed me what it means to stand up when it costs you something." Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through the streets of D.C. Isaiah checked his watch. "I need to get to the Pentagon. Brief with the Joint Chiefs." "Before you go," Amanda said, "I need to tell you something. Derek Sullivan reached out to me. He wants to do an interview." Isaiah's expression hardened. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd think about it. But I wanted to ask you first. What does he want to say?" "He claims he's had a revelation, that he understands now what he did wrong, that he wants to apologize publicly. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. Do you believe him? I don't know. Part of me thinks it's performative, that he wants sympathy, but another part thinks maybe he's genuinely grappling with what he did. Then do the interview, Isaiah said. But don't let him control the narrative. Ask the hard questions. Show the receipts. Let people decide for themselves if he's sincere. You're not angry. I'm furious. But anger without direction just burns. If his apology leads to awareness, if it makes one person think twice before profiling someone, then it's useful. That doesn't mean I forgive him. It means I'm focused on outcomes, not revenge. Amanda made a note. That's going in the documentary. 6 months turned into a year. The changes rippled outward. Airlines implemented their own verification systems, integrated with TSA protocols. Hotels trained staff on implicit bias and launched veteran recognition programs. Rental car companies revised policies. The reforms spread beyond travel to retail banking healthcare. Derek Sullivan's case went to trial. He was convicted of civil rights violations and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison with 5 years probation. His tearful statement to the court was played on news networks, but public opinion was split. Some saw genuine remorse. Others saw a man who was only sorry he got caught. Janet Holloway never apologized publicly. She took a job at a private security firm, was let go within 6 months when her history became known, and eventually moved to a different state to escape the attention. Victor Pearson filed for bankruptcy after legal fees and lost income drained his savings. His daughter, the Air Force captain, eventually reconciled with him after he spent a year in therapy and wrote her a 10-page letter taking full accountability. Trent Baldwin was reinstated to TSA after his suspension demoted, but given a new role, bias compliance officer. He traveled to airports across the country, auditing procedures, training staff, and sharing his story as a cautionary tale. Rosa Delgado became one of the youngest TSA supervisors in San Diego. She implemented peer accountability programs where officers could report concerns without fear of retaliation. Complaints dropped by 40% in her first year. At Denver International Airport, the checkpoint where Isaiah was detained was officially renamed the Grant Memorial Checkpoint. A plaque was installed with Isaiah's photo in dress blues and a simple inscription, "Dignity in Service Never Forgotten." Isaiah attended the unveiling ceremony with Riley. She was 8 now, taller, braver, proud of her dad in ways that went beyond medals. As they stood in front of the plaque, a reporter asked Isaiah how it felt to have a checkpoint named after him. He looked at Riley, then at the plaque, then at the reporter. It feels like a reminder, not a celebration. Every time someone walks through this checkpoint, I want them to remember what happened here. And I want the officers staffing it to remember that their job is to protect people, not profile them. Do you think we've made enough progress? We've made progress. That's not the same as enough. What still needs to change? Isaiah gestured toward the terminal. This is one airport, one agency. But bias doesn't live in policies. It lives in people. And changing people takes generations, not months. So we keep pushing. We keep demanding better. And we refuse to let the moment fade. Riley tugged on his hand. Daddy, can we go now? You promised ice cream. Isaiah smiled. I did promise, didn't I? As they walked away from the plaque, cameras following Riley looked up at him. Are you famous now? No, baby girl. I'm just visible. What's the difference? Famous means people know your name. Visible means people can't ignore what you represent. What do you represent? Isaiah thought about that. I represent everyone who's been told they don't belong, and I'm here to prove them wrong. The school gymnasium smelled like floor wax and nervous energy. Folding chairs lined in rows, parents clutching phones, teachers standing along the walls. It was Riley's school Veterans Day assembly, and Isaiah sat in the 3rd row wearing his dress blues medals polished, trying to blend in, despite knowing that was impossible. Riley didn't know he was there. She thought he was still in D.C., stuck in meetings. That was the plan, the surprise that he'd flown all night to make happen. The principal, Mrs. Chen. Wait, I was told not to use Chen. Let me restart. The principal. Mrs. Brennan, a kind woman in her 50s with graying hair and a warm smile, stepped to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Today we honor those who've served our country. We have several special guests with us, veterans from different branches, different eras, all united by their service. She introduced a Vietnam vet, a Gulf War Marine, an Air Force pilot from the recent conflicts. Each stood waved, received applause. Then Mrs. Brennan smiled in a way that told Isaiah the surprise was coming. And now we have a very special guest, a member of our school family, Riley Grant. Would you please come to the stage? Riley, sitting in the front row with her class, looked confused. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked up the steps. Mrs. Brennan handed her the microphone. Riley, a few weeks ago you wrote a story for our writing contest. It was about heroes. Would you like to read it to everyone? Riley nodded, nervous but determined. She unfolded a piece of paper with crayon drawings in the margins and began to read. My hero is my dad. He's a Navy SEAL. He goes to faraway places and helps people. Sometimes he's gone for a long time and I miss him. But he always comes home. He always keeps his promises. Her voice got steadier as she read. Some people think heroes are loud and strong and scary. But my dad is quiet and calm. He listens. He hugs me when I'm sad. He makes me pancakes on Sundays. He helps me with my homework even when he's tired. One time he was at the airport and some people were mean to him. They didn't believe he was a hero. But he didn't yell. He didn't get mad. He just stood there until they saw him. That's what makes him strong. Not muscles, not medals. Being strong when people are mean. I want to be like that. I want to be strong even when things are hard. My dad taught me that. Riley looked up from the paper eyes, scanning the audience, still not seeing Isaiah. Mrs. Brennan stepped forward. Riley, would you like to tell everyone why your dad couldn't be here today? Riley's face fell slightly. He's in Washington, D.C. He has important meetings, but he said he'd try to come. Mrs. Brennan smiled. Well, what if I told you he didn't just try? What if I told you he's here right now? Riley's eyes went wide. She scanned the crowd again, and this time she saw him. Third row aisle seat, standing slowly smiling. Her face transformed joy and disbelief and pure love. Daddy. She dropped the microphone and ran. Mrs. Brennan caught it before it hit the ground. Isaiah met Riley halfway, knelt down, and caught her as she launched into his arms. The gymnasium erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it. They were locked in their own world, her face buried in his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her like she was the most precious thing in existence. You came, she whispered. I promised, didn't I? You always keep your promises. Always. He stood, lifting her with him, and carried her back toward the stage. The applause continued louder now, accompanied by a few sniffles from parents who understood what they were witnessing. Frank Mitchell, the retired Marine, stood in the back of the gym with tears streaming down his face, saluting. Mrs. Brennan gestured for Isaiah to come to the microphone. Commander Grant, would you like to say a few words? Isaiah set Riley down, but kept her hand in his. He looked out at the audience, at the kids in the front rows, staring up at him with wide eyes, at the parents recording on their phones, at the veterans standing along the walls. He cleared his throat. I'm not great at speeches. I'm better at doing than talking. But Riley asked me to be here, and when she asks, I show up. He looked down at her. She was beaming. A couple months ago, something happened to me at an airport. A lot of you probably saw it on the news. Some people treated me badly because they didn't think I belonged. They looked at me and made assumptions. And for a little while I was angry. Really angry. The room was silent. But then I thought about what Riley would think, about what I'd tell her if she came home from school and said someone was mean to her. I'd tell her that how people treat you says more about them than it does about you. I'd tell her that responding with dignity is harder than responding with anger, but it's also more powerful. He paused, composing himself. I wore this uniform for 14 years. I've been to places I can't talk about, done things I can't describe. I've been scared, hurt, exhausted. But the hardest moment I've ever faced wasn't in combat. It was standing in that airport being treated like I didn't matter and choosing not to let it break me. He knelt down again, eye level with Riley. You wrote that I taught you to be strong when things are hard. But baby girl, you taught me that too. When I'm deployed and it's dark and I'm far from home, I think about you. I think about the promise I made to always come back. That promise is what keeps me going. Riley's eyes filled with tears. You always come back. Always. He stood and addressed the room again. To all the kids here, being a hero isn't about medals or uniforms or being on the news. It's about keeping your promises. It's about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. It's about treating people with respect even when they don't deserve it. That's what I hope you learned today. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. Parents stood. Teachers stood. The veterans in the back snapped to attention and saluted. Isaiah returned the salute, then looked at Mrs. Brennan. Thank you for letting me crash your assembly. She laughed, wiping her eyes. You're welcome any time, Commander. That evening at home, Riley sat at the kitchen table drawing pictures while Isaiah made dinner. She drew him in his uniform, her in her school dress, both of them holding hands. At the top of the page, she wrote in careful letters, My hero keeps promises. Isaiah looked over her shoulder. That's beautiful, Ree. Can I ask you something? Always. Are those people who were mean to you in trouble? Yes. Good. She went back to coloring. They should be. Isaiah sat down across from her. But, you know what, I don't think about them much anymore. Why not? Because thinking about them gives them power. I'd rather think about the people who stood up for me, the people who made things better, the people like you. Riley looked up. Me. You. You wrote that story about heroes. You reminded me why I do this. That matters more than any medal. She smiled, gap-toothed and perfect. You're still my hero, and you're still mine. Later that night, after Riley was asleep, Isaiah stood in the backyard under the stars. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa Delgado. Another smooth day at the checkpoint. No incidents, no profiling. The new system works. Isaiah texted back, Good, keep it that way. Another text, this one from Amanda Rodriguez. Documentary just won the IDA Award for Best Short. Thank you for trusting me with your story. Isaiah, you earned it. Congratulations. One more text from a number he didn't recognize. Commander Grant, this is Captain Sarah Dominguez. I was the pilot who spoke up for you in Denver. I just wanted to tell you that because of what happened, the airline implemented new protocols. We're training crews on bias awareness. Your impact is bigger than you know. Isaiah stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, Thank you for standing up. It mattered. He pocketed the phone and looked up at the stars. The same stars he'd navigated by in deserts and mountains. The same stars that had guided him home through the worst nights of his life. And he thought about the journey, not just his, but the one that had started with a single moment of injustice and had rippled outward into change that would outlast them all. Inside Riley's drawing sat on the refrigerator held by a magnet shaped like an American flag. My hero keeps promises. He'd kept this one, and he'd keep the next one. And the one after that. because that's what heroes do. I need to talk to you for a minute because this story isn't just about Isaiah Grant. It's about every single person watching this who's ever been judged before they were known. Thousands of you have left comments on this channel. You've shared your stories, the time you were followed in a store while white shoppers walked freely, the time you changed your name on a resume and suddenly got callbacks, the time you were told you don't look like a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a SEAL, the time your presence in a space was questioned before your credentials were considered. Isaiah's story went viral because someone was filming. But how many stories like this happen every day with no cameras, no witnesses, no accountability? How many people endure that humiliation in silence and just keep moving? Because what choice do they have? Here's what haunts me about the Denver incident. Derek Sullivan genuinely believed he was protecting people. Janet Holloway thought she was following protocol. Victor Pearson felt confident in his authority. None of them saw themselves as the villain. And that's the most dangerous part, bias so deeply embedded that it feels like common sense. But here's what gives me hope. You. The veterans who stood up in that terminal when they could have stayed quiet. Amanda Rodriguez, who kept her camera rolling when it would have been easier to look away. Frank Mitchell, who spoke up even when he was told to step back. Rosa Delgado, who saw injustice on her third week on the job and decided to be part of the solution instead of the problem. And the millions of you who watched this story shared it, demanded change, and refused to let it fade into the noise. Isaiah told me something after this happened. He said, "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to catch a flight and go home to my daughter." But if my humiliation means one less person gets profiled, one less parent has to explain to their kid why someone treated them like a threat, then it wasn't for nothing. That's the choice we all face every single day. When you see injustice, even the quiet kind, the subtle kind, the kind where people say, "I'm sure they didn't mean it that way," you can be Derek, Janet, and Victor. You can look away, stay silent, protect the system. Or you can be Frank, Amanda, and Rosa. You can speak up, film, testify, and refuse to let wrong become normal. Riley Grant, Isaiah's daughter, drew a picture after all of this. It showed her dad in his uniform with one word underneath strong. Isaiah asked her what made him strong. She said, "You didn't yell. You didn't fight back even though you could have. You just stood there until they saw you. That's the power every one of us has. To stand, to be seen, to refuse to shrink or disappear just because someone decided we don't belong." If you've experienced something like this, I want you to drop your story in the comments. Not for pity, for witness. Because when we share these moments, we build a record that can't be ignored, deleted, or explained away. And if you're someone in a position of authority, TSA, Police Security Management teacher, doctor, I'm talking directly to you. You have a choice every single day. You can see a uniform, a skin color, an accent, an assumption. Or you can see a person. A whole complex, deserving of dignity person. Derek, Janet, and Victor lost everything because they chose wrong. But Trent Baldwin chose to become a whistleblower and helped dismantle a culture of profiling. Rosa chose to join TSA to be part of the solution. Every moment is a choice. Every interaction is a chance to do better. I started this channel because I believe stories matter. Not just the ones that go viral, but the ones that happen in quiet corners where no one's watching. The grandfather who teaches his grandson how to survive a traffic stop. The mother who explains to her daughter why people stare. The veteran who wears civilian clothes to avoid questions. Those stories don't always have happy endings, but they have power. And when we share them, we take that power back. Hit that subscribe button if you believe respect shouldn't require a viral video to be enforced. Share this story if you think dignity is a right, not something you have to earn over and over again. And comment below with one action you'll take this week to stand up when someone else is being judged unfairly. because that's how this ends. Not with one Navy SEAL getting justice, but with all of us deciding that justice is something we protect together in airports and classrooms and traffic stops and job interviews, and every space where someone's humanity is questioned. Isaiah still flies commercial, sometimes in uniform, sometimes not, but he always carries the same quiet strength Riley saw in him. And every time he walks through a checkpoint and gets waved through with respect, he thinks about the people who'll never get that respect because they don't have medals or cameras or Pentagon connections. This channel exists for them, for you, for the next person who stands in a terminal, a courtroom, a classroom, an office, and refuses to be invisible. Stand strong, speak up, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong in a space you've earned the right to occupy.